So Operation Firestorm is finally back in Battlefield in the form of its Battlefield 6 iteration. I was lucky enough to actually play for a couple of hours just the other day thanks to EA, and so today I wanted to show you guys a comparison between the Battlefield 3 version of the map from way back in 2011 and the new current version of the map, showcasing all of the similarities and some pretty big differences as well between the two versions. Now, keep in mind, unfortunately, I didn't really plan for this. Clearly, on the day of recording all of this, I wasn't in creator mode. So, unfortunately, I don't have like proper side-by-side comparisons because at the time of recording, I was just playing the game, trying to get some decent gameplay and get some good impressions of the map. And so, yeah, I don't have any proper side-by-side comparisons. I will definitely do that in the future whenever they bring back other old school maps. But for the sake of today's video, I'll just do my best to kind of showcase all of these similarities and differences. Now, firstly, just touching on the size and the layout of the map. I'm going to show both of the actual map overviews right here, and as you can see, it is a pretty stark difference between the two maps when you actually look at the top-down view, with the Battlefield 3 version only having A, B, and C when it comes to Conquest, whereas the Battlefield 6 version now has D and E on the other side of the road to where those other flags are as well. So A, B, and C are essentially in the exact same locations, but there are just now two extra flags. Now, my dumbass forgot to mention this, so I'm actually just adding this in post. The D and E flags were in the Battlefield 4 version of this map, so Operation Firestorm 2014. And so this isn't the first map to like add those D&E flags. I forgot to mention that because obviously I'm just comparing the Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 6 versions, but D&E were added in Battlefield 4. So I just thought I should quickly mention that. But again, I am only comparing the original version to the current modern day version. The actual layout of the maps is slightly different. The actual overall map layout is the same. It's just a bit different when it comes to the extra flags on the other side of the road. On top of that too, even though I just said the layout is the same, it is definitely a little bit spread out compared to what it was in Battlefield 3, just because again, it is slightly bigger. There are more players nowadays, and I think they did that to essentially just ensure it's not a complete clusterfuck. So it is seemingly just a tiny bit bigger. Now, keep in mind that could be wrong. That is just based on my feeling. I haven't actually like measured distances or anything like that, but it definitely feels just a little bit more spread out in Battlefield 6. Not by a heap, but definitely just a little bit in order to make the map flow a little bit better. Now, going through each of the individual flags when it comes to Conquest, obviously keep in mind Breakthrough wasn't a thing back in Battlefield 3, and we didn't get to play Rush in the preview, so all I can really compare is Conquest. Now, starting with the A flag, this one looks essentially identical. Obviously, everything on the map is like much higher quality, that kind of goes without saying, but the A flag does seem to be pretty much identical. The only key difference here is that they have removed the crane that used to be there, which wasn't really a key part of the flag or anything like that, but that is actually no longer there, nor is the one that is now where the D flag is either, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Moving over to the B flag as well, once again, this one looks really similar, and it is probably the most similar of the lot. There are realistically like no changes to the B flag at all. Again, the entire map has got like slight little changes in terms of just little extra bits of cover. In some places there might just be different rocks. For example, there might be a car that never used to be there. Some areas that is much more prominent, whereas with the A and B flags it definitely doesn't feel that noticeable. Again, it's not an absolute one-to-one recreation, but it looks pretty much identical to how it used to look in Battlefield 3. Moving over to the C flag though, which is kind of like the main area of the map when you look at the actual structures and stuff like that, this one is a massive difference to how it used to be. Now, again, the actual layout and stuff, the way that it plays is essentially the same, so it's not like they've completely gutted it and changed it, but there is way more cover now in this area of the map. If you look at this gameplay here, where I'm just sort of showing the area in Battlefield 3, and then we compare that to Battlefield 6. Look at the insane difference there when it comes to cover. This isn't just like a few extra little pieces of cover. The entire area there, especially like that road area, is honestly almost entirely different just based on how much cover there is. So this to me was one of the most obviously different areas of the map. Again, I don't think it really affects the flow of the map in terms of this still feels how it used to feel. And weirdly, when I went back and recorded this Battlefield 3 gameplay, I was actually shocked how little cover there was, because in my mind after playing the new version, I kind of just always thought there was a lot of cover, but obviously there wasn't. And I think that's just like a nostalgia thing, because all of the maps in all of these old Battlefield games, they didn't really have as much cover as we expect nowadays. So the C flag is definitely a little bit different. Again, the overall layout's pretty much the same. It is just a lot more condensed. There's just a lot more going on there now. And I think a big part of that too is because of Breakthrough, because this is where essentially the first sector is when it comes to Breakthrough. Now, if you guys enjoy this type of content and you want to see more of this once the game actually launches and we eventually get some more old school maps as well, be sure to hit that subscribe button. There is plenty more on the way, not just this type of content, but a hell of a lot more in the lead up to launch and plenty more after launch too. Now, moving over to essentially the brand new area of the map. This is the D&E side of the map. Now, again, these areas were here on the Battlefield 3 map, so it's not entirely new. This was already all there, but there weren't any flags, and they were obviously a lot less fleshed out than they are now because they weren't points of interest back then, whereas now, because they are, they obviously have to put a lot more time into those areas. Now, from what I can tell, the D flag is essentially the exact same sort of area. Again, the only real difference here is that the crane has been removed from that area, just like the A flag. I think they really just wanted to remove like the sniper element. I think having two cranes as well as the big tower in the center, I think that potentially would have been a little bit too much, and so I think that's probably the reason that they've removed those two cranes. As for the E flag, again, this was also over there. I'm pretty sure maybe Rush had an MCOM over here or something, because I kind of do remember that area of the map, but obviously because there's no flags there, it makes me question why the hell was that even over there. So let me know in the comments if there was an MCOM here. It's obviously been a very long time since I've played Battlefield 3, but yeah, that is now the E flag over in this little area. It's like I guess a military barracks sort of area, and this is a pretty fun little area too. Now, one thing that is worth noting is that even the access to this area is a little bit different, because obviously nowadays we can kind of vault things a lot easier. Back in Battlefield 3, you couldn't like climb anything higher than about waist height, so this area was definitely harder to get into. You couldn't jump over the barriers, you had to actually run through the main sort of entrances, whereas now you can actually vault over the top. So even though it's a pretty damn similar layout, it does play a little bit differently than how it did in Battlefield 3. As for the area between D and E, it is relatively the same, but again, there is just a lot more cover. And getting into the actual cover changes, this is probably the most noticeable difference between the two games. As you can see in just like all of the areas across the entire map, there is way more cover. In the Battlefield 6 version, there is a lot more like debris, there's a lot more cars and trucks on the side of the road, especially even on the D and E side of the map, for example. That was fairly barren, whereas now it is kind of actually just chaos over there. There is a big trench that runs alongside the sort of road there, where above the trench there is then a bunch of pipes, so clearly they were digging a trench to lay that pipe in there, and that now adds a hell of a lot of cover compared to the Battlefield 3 version, where there was essentially just a barren road and the desert, and there wasn't that much cover at all. So not only is there like actual cover, there's also just a lot more natural cover, where the actual environment itself has got a lot more, you know, elevation, and there's a lot more like rocks and stuff around there that you can take cover behind. And overall, I think they've done a really good job when it comes to just taking the map that we knew but making it a more modern version that doesn't just involve making it look nicer, it does actually need to play it a little bit different too. Gaming was just different back in 2011. I think we expect a lot more now, and if it was as barren as the Battlefield 3 version, I think a lot of us would be very unhappy with that. So I think they've done a really good job. The map does still feel like Operation Firestorm, and like I said, it actually felt kind of shocking to me to go back to the Battlefield 3 version and realize how kind of empty it is in a lot of areas, because in my memory that's not how it was. Playing this new version, it just felt like I was at home, and then I went back to the old version and I'm like, damn, the new version is actually a lot more in depth. So props to the team there. They've done a really good job here, in my opinion, bringing an old school map and making it feel exactly as it sort of did, but probably making it objectively better when you actually look at all of the differences, while at the same time they've actually kept A and B seemingly like untouched, which is also cool to see, that it's not like the entire map's different. Those two flags do to me feel like they are pretty much identical to how they were in the old game. Now finally, just for some like small little changes that I noticed in no like specific areas. First and foremost, the main tower in sort of the center of the map, it's not really the center, but it just feels like the center. That does now have a ladder that goes all the way to the top, or I think there's technically multiple different ladders that will get you up there. Now I could have sworn that there was a ladder in Battlefield 3, but having just played it and recorded this footage, there is no ladder to get to the top, and I'm pretty sure you could only get there by like jumping out of a jet and landing up there. So you can now like manually get to the top of the tower, which they've probably done to counter people doing that, because if you just got up there and there's no way for anyone to access it, the only way that people can get up there is by jumping out of a jet or a chopper, then it's probably a little bit more annoying to get those snipers down from there. Whereas now we can hopefully try and like sneak up and get some fun kills up there. So I think it's cool that the ladder goes up there. One thing I will say is that it's going to be next to impossible to actually get to the top without getting deleted. If you look at this gameplay here, you can see like this guy was so clearly in my vision, there is nowhere for him to hide. So it's going to be hard to get up there, but it's cool that they've added a ladder in my opinion. Now, the other thing I noticed, which again, like I didn't know this was a thing, but there is no gas leak or oil leak. I don't know what the hell it is, but essentially the flames at the top of the tower, that isn't there in the old version. I could have sworn that it was, but that is not there at the beginning of a game in Battlefield 3, where it is permanently there in Battlefield 6. So that is another change that didn't seem like it was a change, but having played both versions, that is definitely something a little bit different between these two versions. But that is it for a quick comparison of Operation Firestorm when it comes to the Battlefield 3 original of the map, as well as the now new current version of Operation Firestorm. I'm keen to hear all of your thoughts on how this map looks to you guys, so be sure to leave a comment down below. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and we'll see you all out there on the battlefield.